You wake up in the morning, and the house is still quiet. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, feeling around the floor for your slippers. When your bare feet hit the ground, maybe the hardwood feels a little less distinct than it used to. Maybe you feel a strange sensation, like your sock is bunched up under your heel, even though you are completely barefoot. You stand up, shake your leg out, and figure you just slept on it wrong or the circulation was briefly cut off. You walk into the bathroom, turn on the light, and start your routine. You do not look down. You do not inspect the skin or the nails or the way the color shifts when you put your full weight on your heels. You just expect them to carry you to the kitchen, exactly like they have done for 60 or 70 years. We treat our feet like the tires on a car. We figure that as long as they are holding air and getting us down the road, there is absolutely no reason to look closely at the tread. I know exactly how easy it is to ignore what is happening all the way down there at the end of your legs. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 81 years old. I live out here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where the mornings are bright and the heat bakes the pavement by noon. But I grew up a long way from this desert. I was born and raised back in Columbus, Ohio. My father was a man who worked with his hands. He spent 4 decades in a manufacturing plant, standing on hard concrete floors for 10 hours a shift. He viewed his body as a piece of heavy industrial machinery, and his feet were just the foundation blocks that held the machine up. If his feet ached, he bought thicker boots. If they went numb, he stamped them on the ground until the feeling came back. He died ignoring warning signs that could have easily bought him another 10 years of life, simply because he believed that paying attention to small discomforts was a luxury he could not afford. I spent most of my adult life working in community health education, trying to undo that exact kind of stubborn thinking. I spent my years sitting in union halls and community centers, taking the complicated medical jargon that doctors used and translating it into plain, honest English. I tried to help folks understand that the body does not usually shout when it is in trouble. It whispers. And the place where it whispers the loudest, and where we ignore it the most consistently, is in our feet. We tend to think of diabetes as a disease of the blood or the pancreas or the stomach. We think about sugar levels and insulin and what we put on our dinner plates. But when blood sugar stays consistently high, it does not just float around harmlessly in the background. It fundamentally changes the fluid dynamics and the structural integrity of your entire body. I learned this the hard way, not from reading a medical journal in a library, but from walking around my own neighborhood and noticing things that I tried very hard to dismiss as just another natural part of getting older. About 3 years ago, I started feeling a strange tingling in my toes when I would take my morning walk. It was not painful at first. It felt exactly like a mild electrical buzz, like I had a small motor vibrating right inside the sole of my shoe. Sometimes it felt like I was walking on a small, sharp pebble, but every time I took my shoe off and shook it out on the sidewalk, it was completely empty. I told myself it was just a worn-out pair of walking shoes. I bought new inserts. I bought thicker socks. But the buzzing did not stop. It eventually turned into a dull, heavy numbness, especially at night when I was sitting perfectly still in my favorite recliner. I finally mentioned it to my son, Daniel. Daniel is a physical therapist up in Denver. He spends his entire professional life looking at how bodies move and what stops them from moving. I told him about the phantom pebble in my shoe. He did not brush it off, and he did not suggest I buy a different brand of sneakers. He asked me when I had last had my A1C checked, which is the test that measures your average blood sugar over a span of a few months. I asked him what my blood sugar had to do with a pebble in my shoe. Daniel explained that the human body is wired exactly like a house. You have a main electrical panel in your spine, and wires run all the way down through the walls to the furthest rooms. Your feet are the furthest rooms in the house. When your blood sugar is too high for too long, that sugar acts like rust on the electrical wires. It slowly eats away at the protective insulation around the nerves. The medical term for this is peripheral neuropathy, but all it really means is that the wiring is short-circuiting. Your brain stops receiving clear, accurate signals from the floor. That tingling, that numbness, that frustrating feeling of wearing a tight sock when you are barefoot, that is the literal sound of the electrical grid failing. It is one of the very first signs that your body is no longer processing sugar correctly, and it is happening in the furthest, most vulnerable part of the system where the current is the weakest. Once Daniel explained the wiring to me, I started paying much closer attention to the foundation. And because I was finally paying attention, I noticed the second thing. It happened during the winter. Now, winter in Arizona is not like the brutal winters in Ohio. It rarely gets truly cold, but I found myself sitting in my living room with the thermostat set to a comfortable 72 degrees, wearing heavy wool socks because my feet felt like blocks of ice. They were physically cold to the touch. I thought my internal thermostat was just breaking down with age. My daughter Laura is a registered nurse up in Phoenix. She came down to visit one weekend, and she saw me wearing those heavy socks in the middle of a warm afternoon. She asked me to take them off. She pressed her thumb firmly into the top of my foot, right near the ankle, and silently watched how long it took for the pink color to return to the skin. Then she explained the plumbing. Laura told me that while the nerves are the electrical grid, the blood vessels are the irrigation system. High blood sugar does not just rust the wires, it fundamentally thickens the water. It turns your blood into a heavy, slow-moving syrup. Your heart has to pump that thick syrup all the way down to your toes against gravity through vessels that are naturally becoming a bit narrower and stiffer as you age. When the syrup gets too thick, the irrigation system fails at the furthest points. The warm, oxygen-rich blood simply cannot reach your toes efficiently anymore. That is why they are cold. It is not the weather outside. It is a severe lack of internal heating caused by poor restricted circulation. Laura also pointed out something else that day, something I had noticed in the shower but completely dismissed. The skin on my lower legs and toes was completely smooth. There was no hair left at all. I had just assumed that older men lose the hair on their legs, the same way they lose it on their heads. It seemed like a normal, harmless progression. But Laura told me that hair follicles require a massive, steady amount of blood flow and nutrients to survive. When the irrigation system starts shutting down because the blood is too thick with sugar, the body has to prioritize. It fights to keep the essential muscles and tissues alive, and it permanently stops sending resources to the hair follicles on the feet and ankles. A completely bald, shiny lower leg is not just a cosmetic sign of aging. It is a sign of a localized drought. It means the plumbing is failing to deliver the necessary resources to the surface. That conversation about the plumbing made me realize the terrible danger of the next warning sign. If the blood cannot reach your feet to keep them warm or to grow hair, it also cannot reach your feet to drop off the repair crew when something breaks. We all get scrapes. We bump our toes on the edge of the bed frame in the dark. We get a blister from a new pair of stiff shoes, or we scratch our ankle on a low branch in the garden. For my entire life, a minor scrape was a 2-day event. It would form a scab, heal over tightly, and disappear. But a few months before Laura visited, I had nicked the back of my heel on the metal edge of my screen door. It was a tiny cut. I washed it, put a bandage on it, and completely forgot about it. A week later, I took the bandage off, and the cut looked exactly the same. It was not healing. In fact, the edges looked a little angry, red, and swollen. I kept cleaning it, putting more ointment on it, and eventually, after almost 3 full weeks, it finally closed up. I thought my immune system was just getting tired and slow. What I did not understand, and what Laura made very clear, is that when your blood is thick with sugar, the white blood cells, the critical construction workers that fix the damage, cannot get to the job site. They are stuck in the mud. Furthermore, the high sugar environment is an absolute feast for bacteria. So, you have a dangerous situation where the repair crew cannot arrive, and the microscopic invaders have an unlimited food supply. A cut that will not heal is not a minor inconvenience. For someone over 60, a slow-healing wound on the foot is a blaring siren. It is the exact path that leads from a minor blister to a devastating deep tissue infection. It is the specific reason why people lose toes, and it all starts because the plumbing is backed up with unmanaged sugar. As I began to look at my feet, not just as tired tires, but as the dashboard indicators for my whole internal engine, the signs were everywhere. The fifth sign was the color. I noticed that when I sat with my legs hanging down over the edge of the recliner for a long time, my feet would turn a dark, unnatural shade of red. But when I lay flat in bed and elevated them on a pillow, they would quickly turn incredibly pale, almost white. This is not normal fluid dynamics. It is a condition directly tied to severe vascular strain. The blood pools heavily when gravity pulls it down, because the return valves are incredibly weak, and the blood drains completely away when elevated because there is simply not enough pressure from the heart to keep the pipes full. The pressure system was broken, and the sugar was the primary culprit restricting the flow. Then there was the skin itself. Out here in the desert, everyone has dry skin. We buy lotion by the gallon to fight the climate. So when the heels of my feet started cracking, getting rough and incredibly dry, I just blamed the Arizona heat. I bought a pumice stone and thicker, more expensive lotion. But the cracks kept coming back, deeper and more painful than before. I learned that the autonomic nervous system, the invisible internal computer that controls the automatic functions of your body, also controls the sweat glands and the moisture regulation in your feet. When the sugar rusts those specific nerves, your feet literally forget how to sweat. They completely lose their natural ability to stay lubricated and flexible. The skin becomes rigid, dry, and brittle. Those deep cracks in the heels are not just a cosmetic issue. They are open, unprotected doors for infection, leading right into the deepest layers of tissue, sitting on a part of the body that carries your entire physical weight. You are essentially walking on a shattered foundation. The seventh sign was right there on the tips of my toes. The nails. I had noticed that a couple of my toenails had become noticeably thick, brittle, and slightly yellow. Like most men my age, I just shrugged it off as a mild fungal issue picked up from a gym locker room decades ago. I bought some over-the-counter clear liquid that promised to clear it up, painted it on diligently, and waited. It did absolutely nothing to fix the problem. The truth is, fungal infections in the toenails are incredibly common, but they thrive and multiply at a terrifying rate when your blood sugar is high. Fungi feed aggressively on sugar. When your body is pumping sugar-rich blood all the way down to your toes, and your immune system is too compromised by that same heavy syrup to fight back, you are basically throwing industrial fertilizer on weeds. A stubborn, thick, yellow nail that will not respond to standard pharmacy treatments is often a direct reflection of the chemical imbalance happening inside your pancreas. It is the sugar manifesting on the hard surface of your body. The eighth sign was the swelling. I am not talking about the normal minor puffiness you get after standing on a ladder for 3 hours painting a ceiling. I am talking about a heavy, persistent, uncomfortable swelling around the ankles and the tops of the feet that makes your normal shoes feel 2 sizes too small by mid-afternoon. When diabetes strains the kidneys, those vital organs slowly lose their ability to filter fluid properly out of the blood. The excess water has to go somewhere, and gravity always wins the battle. It pools heavily in the lowest part of the house. That tight, waterlogged feeling in your ankles is your kidneys sending a desperate distress signal, warning you that the filtration system is being overwhelmed by the daily workload. The final sign, the ninth indicator, was the one that actually scared me the most because it actively stopped me from living my daily life. I have always enjoyed my morning walks. It is how I clear my head. But I started getting these sharp, deep, twisting cramps in the calves of my legs and the arches of my feet after walking only 3 or 4 blocks. The pain was so intense that I would have to stop and pretend I was admiring a neighbor's landscaping just to rest my legs and catch my breath. As soon as I stood still for 2 or 3 minutes, the pain would completely vanish. But the moment I started walking again, it came right back. Doctors call this claudication. I call it an engine starving for oxygen. When you walk, your leg muscles demand a massive increase in oxygenated blood to perform the work. But if those pipes are narrowed, stiff, and damaged from years of elevated blood sugar, the extra blood simply cannot get through the bottleneck. The muscle starts suffocating while it works. The cramp is the muscle physically screaming for air. It is a direct mechanical failure caused by restricted supply lines. When you have to stop walking because your calves feel like they are locked in a steel vise, it is not just age creeping up on you, it is severe vascular restriction. I sat in my chair one evening, looking down at my feet, and I finally put the whole clear picture together. The numbness, the coldness, the hair loss, the slow healing, the color changes, the dry skin, the thick nails, the swelling, the cramping. None of these were isolated, random incidents of getting older. They were all connected chapters in the exact same story. They were the dashboard warning lights flashing brightly, telling me that the engine was running too hot, that the oil was too thick, and that the electrical grid was failing fast. We have a terrible habit, especially those of us who grew up learning to just push through the physical pain, of ignoring the small things until they violently become catastrophic things. We think that diabetes is something that happens suddenly. We think you just wake up one day and the doctor hands you a formal diagnosis. But the body does not work like that. The body warns you for years before the engine seizes up. It warns you in the furthest, quietest corners of your system. If I had continued to ignore the phantom pebble in my shoe, the cold toes in a warm room, and the slow healing scrape on my heel, I know exactly what would have happened. The numbness would have spread higher up my leg. I would have stepped on something sharp in the yard, driven it deep into my heel, and never felt a thing. The wound would have festered silently because the repair crew could not get there through the thick blood. The infection would have taken hold because the environment was rich with sugar, and I would have ended up in a sterile hospital bed, facing the kind of surgical decisions that take away a person's mobility permanently. I saw it happen to good, hard-working men in Ohio. I saw men lose toes, then entire feet, then parts of their lower legs, all because they thought looking closely at their health was something they could safely put off until tomorrow. This is the most important thing I can tell you today. The small things are the only things that truly matter in the long run. When you catch the signs early, when the wires are just starting to tingle and the pipes are just starting to slow down, you have an incredible amount of power. You have the power to change the entire trajectory of your health. I went to my doctor. We ran the comprehensive blood panels. My A1C was indeed climbing steadily into the danger zone. I was pre-diabetic, standing right on the edge of the cliff looking down. But because I caught it, because I finally stopped making lazy excuses for my feet, I could actually do something about it. I changed the way I ate. I drastically adjusted the empty carbohydrates that were flooding my system with heavy sugar. I kept walking every morning, pushing safely through the initial discomfort to force the blood vessels to adapt and open up. I started inspecting my feet every single night before I got into bed, looking closely for any new scrape, any unusual redness, any deep crack in the skin. It took real time, but the engine responded. The blood thinned out. The tingling subsided to a whisper. The healthy color returned to my toes. The body desperately wants to heal itself, but you have to stop feeding it the poison, and you have to start listening when it whispers. Maybe you are sitting there right now, feeling that familiar bunching of the sock that is not really there. Maybe your feet are cold even though the room is perfectly warm. Do not dismiss it today. Do not just buy a thicker pair of socks or a softer, wider pair of shoes. Look closely at the dashboard. Acknowledge the warning lights. Tomorrow morning, before you put your shoes on to start your day, I want you to sit on the edge of your bed and really look at your feet. Look at the texture of the skin, the thickness of the nails, the color of the toes. Feel the temperature with your hands. If you have a cut that has been there for more than a few days, or if you have to regularly stop walking because your calves are screaming in pain, write it down on a piece of paper. Call your doctor's office. Tell them exactly what you are feeling and experiencing. Ask them to run a full blood panel, specifically checking your A1C and requesting an evaluation of your vascular function. The independence we fiercely want to keep, the ability to walk to the neighborhood mailbox, to drive to the grocery store, to stand in our own kitchens and cook a meal, is entirely dependent on our willingness to maintain the foundation of the house. You protect your independence by paying strict attention to the ground you stand on every single day. The body does not ask for things twice in the same way. What you casually ignore today can very easily limit you tomorrow. But the beautiful truth is that there is still time. If you are watching this, if you are listening to me right now, you still have the capacity to act. You are still in the driver's seat of your own life. Take care of yourselves, pay close attention to the small things, keep advocating for your own machinery, and I will talk to you again soon.